I stood outside the maternity ward, holding a handmade blanket, while my son blocked the door and told me I wasn't welcome to meet my own grandchild. "Mom, you need to leave. Jessica doesn't want you here. She said you're too controlling, too judgmental, and frankly, we don't need your negativity around our baby." My hands went numb. The blanket I'd spent 3 weeks knitting slipped from my fingers and landed on the cold hospital floor. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at my son's face, the face I'd kissed goodnight for 18 years, now twisted with something I didn't recognize. If you're listening to this right now, please stay with me. I need someone to hear what happened next. Hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because I want to know I'm not alone in this. My name is Margaret Eleanor Hartwell. I'm 72 years old. That day at St. Vincent's Hospital in Portland was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. Instead, it became the beginning of something much darker. I raised Daniel alone after his father died in a construction accident when he was only 6. I worked double shifts as a school secretary, skipped meals so he could have new shoes, and saved every penny so he could go to college without debt. When he met Jessica 3 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms. I threw them an engagement party. I paid for half their wedding. I even helped with the down payment on their house. But somewhere along the way, Jessica decided I was the enemy, and my son chose her side without asking a single question. What I didn't know that day, standing in that sterile hallway with my heart breaking, was that a nurse named Caroline had been watching everything, and she knew something about Jessica that would change everything. I remember the first time I held Daniel after his father's funeral. He was so small, so confused. He kept asking when Daddy was coming home. I didn't have an answer that would make sense to a 6-year-old. So I just held him tighter and promised him I'd never leave. I kept that promise for 36 years. I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Mornings at the elementary school, evenings cleaning offices downtown. I attended every parent-teacher conference, every baseball game, every school play. I was always there, even when I was exhausted, even when my feet ached so badly I could barely stand. Daniel was my whole world. He grew into a good man. Kind, thoughtful. The type who called me every Sunday just to check in. When he graduated college, he thanked me in front of everyone. He said I was the strongest person he knew. I cried that day. Happy tears, proud tears. Then he met Jessica at a work conference. She was charming, polite, well-dressed. When he brought her home for the first time, she complimented my cooking and asked about family photos on the wall. She seemed genuinely interested in our history. I thought she was perfect for him. The engagement happened fast. 6 months after they met, Daniel proposed. I was thrilled. I threw them a party at my house, invited all our relatives, spent weeks planning every detail. Jessica smiled through the whole thing. But I noticed small things. The way she'd roll her eyes when I suggested something. The way she'd interrupt me mid-sentence to correct a story. The way she'd touch Daniel's arm and steer him away when I tried to talk to him alone. At the engagement dinner, surrounded by both families, Jessica stood up to make a toast. She talked about how lucky she was to have found Daniel, how excited she was to start their new life together. Then she said it. Daniel's finally learning to make decisions without running to mommy first. It's about time, right? Everyone laughed. Even Daniel chuckled, squeezing her hand. I smiled. I nodded. I pretended it didn't feel like a slap, but it did. It felt like she'd reached across the table and struck me in front of everyone, and nobody noticed. Or maybe they noticed and didn't care. After that night, things shifted. Daniel started canceling our Sunday calls. He'd text instead, short messages that felt distant. When I invited them over for dinner, Jessica always had an excuse. Work, appointments, fatigue. I stopped asking after a while. I didn't want to be the overbearing mother she kept hinting I was. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself every bride wants space to build her own family. I told myself to be patient, to give them room. But deep down, I felt it. I was being erased, piece by piece, memory by memory. and I let it happen because I didn't want to be difficult. But the hospital door incident wasn't the first time Jessica had tried to push me out. 2 months before the baby was born, something happened at their house that should have been my warning. I'd made a casserole, Daniel's favorite, the one I used to make every Sunday when he was growing up. I thought maybe bringing it over would be a nice gesture. Jessica was 7 months pregnant, probably tired, probably not cooking much. I just wanted to help. I didn't call ahead. I know I should have, but it was only a 15-minute drive, and I figured I'd just drop it off and leave. I wasn't planning to stay. I just wanted them to know I was thinking of them. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed several cars parked along the street. The living room lights were on, and I could hear laughter coming from inside. I walked up to the porch, casserole dish warm in my hands, and knocked on the door. Jessica answered. Her smile disappeared the second she saw me. "Oh, Margaret, we weren't expecting you." Behind her, I could see the dining room table set for 10 people. Jessica's parents, her 2 sisters, her brother and his wife, even her cousins. A full family dinner, and I hadn't been invited. Daniel appeared behind her, his face flushing red. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at the floor. Jessica's mother leaned back in her chair, loud enough for me to hear through the open door. "Well, I suppose we can set another place, though the table's already quite full." Her tone said everything. I wasn't wanted. I was an intrusion, an afterthought. I stood on that porch, holding the casserole, while Jessica's entire family stared at me through the window. Some of them whispered to each other. Some of them looked away. Nobody smiled. Nobody waved me in. "I just wanted to drop this off," I said quietly, handing the dish to Jessica, Daniel's favorite. She took it without looking at me. "Thanks, we'll eat it later." Then she closed the door. I stood there for a moment, frozen. I could still hear them laughing inside. The conversation picked up again, as if I'd never been there. I walked back to my car, hands shaking, vision blurred with tears. I refused to let fall until I was safely down the street. That night, Daniel sent me a text. "Mom, you can't just show up. Jessica's family is important to us, and we need boundaries." Boundaries. That word felt like a knife. I'd never needed boundaries before. I'd never been the type of mother who overstayed her welcome or demanded attention. I'd always respected his space, his choices, his life. But suddenly, I was the problem. Suddenly I was too much. I realized then that Jessica had built a new family for Daniel. A family where I didn't fit. A family where I wasn't welcome. And Daniel had let her do it without a single word of protest. I told myself things would get better when the baby came. I told myself Daniel would remember who raised him. But when I called to ask about the due date, Jessica answered his phone and said something that made my blood run cold. I'd been waiting weeks to hear about the delivery plan. I wanted to know when to expect the baby, whether they needed anything, if there was any way I could help. I wasn't trying to intrude. I just wanted to be part of it. When I called Daniel's number, Jessica picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hello?" Her voice was flat, cold. "Hi, Jessica. It's Margaret. I was hoping to talk to Daniel about the baby. Is he around?" There was a long pause. Then she sighed, like I'd asked her to do something exhausting. "Margaret, I need to be honest with you. I don't want you at the hospital when the baby is born." My chest tightened. "What? You're too much. You smother people." "Daniel agrees with me. He just doesn't want to hurt your feelings by saying it himself." I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, my knuckles turning white. "Can I talk to him? Please?" "He's busy, and honestly, this is between you and me. You need to respect our boundaries. We'll let you know when you can visit, but not at the hospital. Not right away." Then she hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. I tried calling back, once, twice, 5 times. Nobody answered. I left a voicemail, my voice shaking. "Daniel, please call me. I just want to talk. I just want to understand." He never called back. Days passed, then weeks. I sent a gift for the baby, a handmade blanket with the initials EMH embroidered in the corner. I'd spent hours on it, choosing the softest yarn, stitching every letter with care. I mailed it with a card that said, "For my grandchild, with all my love, Grandma Margaret." I never got a response, not a text, not a call, nothing. I started to wonder if I'd ever meet this baby. I started to wonder if Jessica would keep me away forever. The isolation became unbearable. I stopped eating. Food tasted like nothing. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face turning away from me. I felt like I was grieving someone who was still alive. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg, but I just sat there, holding the phone, feeling like I'd lost my son forever. And then, 3 weeks later, I got the call. Daniel's voice, shaking. "Mom, Jessica's in labor. The baby's coming." I grabbed my purse and drove to the hospital, hope flooding back into my chest. But when I arrived, my son was waiting at the door, and he wasn't smiling. After Daniel blocked me from entering the maternity ward, I collapsed into a chair in the waiting area. I couldn't cry. I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at the floor, the blanket I'd knitted still lying where it had fallen. A nurse approached me. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun. She held out a tissue. I saw what happened. "I'm so sorry." I took the tissue, but didn't use it. I just held it in my lap, crumpling it between my fingers. She sat down beside me, her voice low and careful. "I need to tell you something about Jessica. Something you deserve to know." I looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "My name is Caroline. I've been Jessica's nurse throughout this pregnancy, and I've witnessed some troubling behavior." My heart started pounding. "What kind of behavior?" Caroline glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Then she leaned closer. "Jessica has been lying to the medical staff. She's been claiming you're unstable, dangerous. She filed paperwork to keep you away from the baby, citing false allegations." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "False allegations? What did she say?" "That you've been harassing her, threatening her, showing up unannounced, and refusing to leave. None of it's true, is it?" I shook my head, tears finally spilling over. "No, I've done nothing but try to be part of their lives." Caroline nodded slowly. "I thought so. I've seen this before, women who isolate their partners from family. It's a form of control, and your son, he doesn't even realize what's happening." I wiped my face with the tissue, my hands trembling. "What do I do?" Caroline reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She pressed it into my palm. "This is a family lawyer I trust. Her name is Diane Rothman. You might need her." I stared at the paper, my mind racing. "You really think it's that bad?" Caroline's expression was grave. "I think Jessica is not well, and I think your grandchild deserves to have you in their life. You fight back, quietly, carefully, but you fight." I clutched the paper tightly, feeling something shift inside me. Not anger, not rage, just clarity. For the first time in months, I knew what I had to do. I left the hospital that night without meeting my grandchild. But I didn't leave empty-handed. I had Caroline's number. I had the lawyer's contact, and for the first time in months, I had something I thought I'd lost forever. A plan. The next morning, I called Diane Rothman. Her assistant scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. I spent the hours in between gathering everything I could think of. Photos of Daniel's childhood, birthday cards he'd written me over the years, text messages from before Jessica entered his life. I wanted proof. Proof that I wasn't the villain Jessica painted me to be. Diane's office was small but professional. She was in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She shook my hand firmly and gestured for me to sit. "Tell me everything," she said, pulling out a legal pad. I did. I told her about the engagement dinner, the uninvited family meal, the phone call, the hospital. I showed her the texts, the photos, the blanket I'd tried to give Daniel. My voice cracked more than once, but I kept going. When I finished, Diane leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the pad. "Has Jessica made false claims about you before?" "Not that I know of, but Caroline, the nurse, said she told hospital staff I was dangerous." Diane made a note. Has Daniel cut off contact with other family members? I thought about it. His uncle, his childhood friends. He doesn't see anyone from before Jessica anymore. Do you have documentation of your relationship with Daniel before Jessica? I nodded, sliding the folder of photos and messages across the desk. Diane flipped through them, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up. In this state, grandparents have legal rights to visitation, especially if they can prove a prior relationship with the child's parent. You have that. But I need to warn you. This will be a long, painful process. Jessica will fight you. She'll paint you as unstable, controlling, intrusive. Are you prepared for that? I met her gaze, my voice steady. I've already been painted that way. At least now I'll have a chance to defend myself. Diane nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Then let's get started. She explained the process. Filing a petition, gathering witnesses, preparing for court. It sounded overwhelming. But for the first time in months, I felt like I had power again. I wasn't just sitting in my kitchen, crying over unanswered calls. I was doing something. Diane filed the petition for grandparents' visitation rights the next day, and when Jessica received the court summons, everything exploded. Daniel called me 2 days later. I was in my kitchen, making tea when my phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. I answered, my hand shaking. Hello? What the hell did you do? His voice was sharp, furious. I'd never heard him speak to me like that before. Daniel, You're suing us? You're taking us to court? I'm not suing you. I'm petitioning for visitation rights. There's a difference. No, there isn't. You're dragging us into a legal battle because you can't accept that we need space. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. Daniel, I haven't seen you in months. I wasn't allowed to meet my grandchild. I'm not trying to control your life. I just want to be part of it. You're being vindictive. You're being cruel. You're being selfish. Each word felt like a stone thrown at my chest. But I didn't break. I'm being a grandmother who loves her family. There was a rustling sound. Then Jessica's voice came through the speaker, sharp and venomous. You'll never see this baby. Never. I'll make sure of it. I took a breath, my voice steady. I have rights, and I'm using them. The line went dead. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands still trembling. Days later, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a letter from Jessica's attorney, a counter-petition claiming I was mentally unstable and a danger to the child. The letter included fabricated incidents, me showing up unannounced and refusing to leave, making threats, exhibiting erratic behavior. None of it was true. But there it was, in black and white, ready to be presented to a judge. I called Diane immediately. She wasn't surprised. This is psychological warfare, she said. Jessica's going to try to destroy your reputation. Stay calm. Document everything. Don't engage with her or Daniel outside of legal channels. I followed her advice. But it was hard. Friends started asking questions. Neighbors whispered when I walked by. People who used to smile at me now avoided eye contact. Rumors spread. I was the crazy grandmother, the obsessed mother-in-law, the woman who couldn't let go. I wanted to scream at all of them. I wanted to show them the truth, but I stayed silent. I kept my head down. I focused on building my case. Because while Jessica was busy painting me as a monster, I was doing something she didn't expect. I was gathering witnesses, and one of them was about to blow her perfect image to pieces. I reached out to Marcus first. He'd been Daniel's best friend since middle school. They'd been inseparable growing up, but I hadn't seen Marcus in over a year. I found his number in my old contacts and called him one evening. Margaret? Wow, it's been a while. How are you? I've been better, Marcus. I need to ask you something. Have you noticed changes in Daniel since he married Jessica? There was a long pause. Then Marcus sighed. Yeah, he's different. Jessica controls everything. Who he talks to, where he goes, what he says. I tried bringing it up once. Told him I missed hanging out. She overheard and banned me from their house. Said I was a bad influence. My chest tightened. Would you be willing to testify about that in court? Another pause. You're really taking this to court? I am. I need people who can speak to what Daniel was like before Jessica. People who've seen the changes. Yeah, Marcus said finally. I'll do it. Daniel's my brother, and what she's doing to him. It's not right. Next, I contacted Linda, a woman who used to work with Daniel before he switched jobs. She'd attended the wedding and the rehearsal dinner. When I called her, she remembered me immediately. Oh, Margaret, I've thought about you so many times since that dinner. Why? Because of what Jessica said. She made a toast at the rehearsal. She joked about Daniel finally being free from his mother's leash. Everyone laughed, but I saw your face. You looked destroyed. I closed my eyes, the memory flooding back. Would you be willing to provide a written statement about that? Absolutely. What she did was cruel, and honestly, I've always wondered how you were doing. I thanked her, my voice thick with emotion. These people, Marcus, Linda, Caroline, they saw what I saw. They knew the truth, and they were willing to stand beside me. But the emotional toll was crushing. I barely slept. I lost weight. My hands shook constantly. Every time my phone rang, my heart raced. But I refused to give up. I couldn't, not when my grandchild's future was at stake. And then, 2 weeks before the court date, Caroline called me. Margaret, you need to come to the hospital. There's something you need to see. I met Caroline in the hospital parking garage late that evening. She was waiting by her car, holding a large manila envelope. Her face was tense, nervous. I shouldn't be doing this, she said as I approached. But I can't stay silent anymore. She handed me the envelope. It was sealed, heavy. What is this? Copies of Jessica's medical records from the pregnancy. I made them before I left my shift tonight. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were pages of notes, charts, and observations. Caroline leaned over, pointing to specific entries. Look here. Jessica refused mental health screenings multiple times. We recommended them because she was exhibiting signs of extreme anxiety and paranoia. She declined every time. I scanned the notes. One entry stood out. Patient displays signs of extreme control and paranoia. Recommend follow-up counseling. Caroline flipped to another page, and here, she made alarming statements to staff about keeping people away from my baby. We documented it because it concerned us. I looked up at her, my voice barely a whisper. Why are you showing me this? Because she's not well, Margaret. And your son is trapped in it. That baby. I'm worried about that baby. I felt tears prick my eyes. Can we use this in court? You have to, before it's too late. I drove home that night, with the envelope sitting on the passenger seat. I called Diane as soon as I walked through my door. I have Jessica's medical records. Diane was silent for a moment. How did you get those? A nurse gave them to me. She's concerned about Jessica's mental state. Are they legitimate? Yes. Then they're admissible. Bring them to my office first thing tomorrow. I hung up and sat down at my kitchen table, staring at the envelope. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting my grandchild from a mother who was spiraling. This was about making sure Emma grew up safe, loved, and surrounded by people who could see the truth. The court date arrived. I walked into that courtroom alone, carrying a folder full of evidence and a heart full of fear. Jessica sat across from me, smiling like she'd already won, but she didn't know what I had, and she didn't know who was about to walk through those doors. The courtroom was cold and sterile. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Jessica sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, dressed in a soft pink blouse and pearls. She looked composed, confident, like a woman who had nothing to hide. Daniel sat beside her, his face pale and drawn. He wouldn't look at me. Jessica's attorney stood first. He was tall, silver-haired, with a voice that filled the room. Your Honor, my client is a new mother trying to protect her child from a woman who has repeatedly violated boundaries, made threats, and exhibited unstable behavior. Margaret Hartwell is obsessed with controlling her son's life. She cannot accept that he has moved on and started a family of his own. He called Jessica to the stand. She walked up slowly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She looked fragile, vulnerable. Mrs. Hartwell, her attorney began, Can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Jessica's voice was soft, shaking. At first, I tried to have a good relationship with her. I really did, but she was always hovering, showing up unannounced, criticizing my choices. When I got pregnant, it got worse. She started calling constantly, demanding to be involved in every decision. I felt suffocated. Did she ever threaten you? Yes. She said if I didn't let her see the baby, she'd make my life miserable. She said she'd take Daniel away from me. I gripped the edge of my chair. None of that was true, not a single word. And how has this affected you? Jessica's voice cracked. I'm terrified. I don't feel safe. I don't want her near my baby. I just want to protect my family. Daniel nodded beside her, his jaw tight. My heart broke watching him. Believe her lies. Then Diane stood. She was calm, measured, her voice steady. Your Honor, I'd like to call Marcus Brennan to the stand. Marcus walked in, dressed in a simple button-down shirt and slacks. He looked nervous but determined. He took the oath and sat down. Mr. Brennan, how do you know Daniel Hartwell? We've been best friends since 7th grade. And have you noticed any changes in him since he married Jessica? Marcus hesitated, glancing at Daniel, then he nodded. Yeah, he's different. He doesn't see his old friends anymore. He doesn't call. Jessica controls everything, who he talks to, where he goes, what he says. I tried bringing it up once, and she banned me from their house. Jessica's attorney objected, but the judge waved him off. Continue, Mr. Brennan. Daniel used to be close with his mom. He talked about her all the time, but after Jessica came into the picture, that stopped. It's like she wanted him all to herself. Next, Diane called Linda to the stand. She described the rehearsal dinner, Jessica's cruel toast, the way everyone laughed while I sat there, humiliated. Jessica's face tightened, but she said nothing. Then Caroline took the stand. She presented the medical records, explaining Jessica's refusal of mental health care, her paranoid statements, her concerning behavior. The judge listened carefully, flipping through the documents. Finally, Diane called me to the stand. I walked up slowly, my legs shaking. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Diane's voice was gentle. Mrs. Hartwell, why are you here today? I took a breath. Because I love my son, and I love my grandchild. I'm not trying to control anyone's life. I just want to be part of it. Can you describe your relationship with Daniel before Jessica? I did. I talked about raising him alone, working 2 jobs, attending every school event. I talked about how close we were, how he used to call me every Sunday. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just told the truth. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Hartwell, if I grant you visitation, will you respect boundaries? I met her gaze. Yes, Your Honor. I just want to love my grandchild. That's all I've ever wanted. The judge removed her glasses, looking directly at Jessica. I've heard enough. She ruled in my favor. Supervised visitation, twice a month, with the possibility of expansion after 6 months. Jessica's face went white. Daniel stared at the floor, and I walked out of that courtroom with my head high, knowing I'd fought for something sacred. My first supervised visit with Emma took place in a neutral location, a family center with a social worker present. Jessica and Daniel arrived late. Jessica's face tight with anger. She didn't speak to me. She didn't even look at me. The social worker brought Emma out in a carrier. She was tiny, wrapped in a pink blanket, her eyes wide and curious. My breath caught. Mrs. Hartwell, you can hold her now. I reached down and lifted Emma into my arms. She was so light, so warm, tears streamed down my face as I looked at her. She had Daniel's eyes, my husband's nose. She was perfect. I whispered, I'm your grandmother, and I will always fight for you. Emma blinked up at me, her tiny hand reaching toward my face. I let her touch my cheek, her fingers soft and warm. The visit lasted 1 hour. Jessica barely spoke. Daniel avoided eye contact. But I didn't care. I was holding my granddaughter, and that was all that mattered. As I left, the social worker quietly told me, You did the right thing. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my chest. That was 6 months ago. Since then, Jessica and Daniel have slowly started to soften. Daniel called me last week. He said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't see what was happening. I told him we'd talk when he was ready, because I've learned something through all of this. I'm no longer the woman who smiled through humiliation and swallowed her pain. I'm someone who fought back with dignity and won. I see Emma regularly now, and Daniel is slowly rebuilding our relationship. Jessica still keeps her distance, but I don't need her approval anymore. I've learned that love isn't about being liked. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. I've learned that silence isn't peace, it's surrender, and I refuse to surrender ever again. I used to think being a good mother meant staying quiet. Now I know it means standing up. If you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Truly, your presence here means more than you know. If my story touched you, if it reminded you of your own fight, please leave a like and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and whether you've ever had to fight for someone you love. Because stories like mine, they're not just mine, they belong to all of us who refuse to be erased. And I want you to know, you are not alone. I stand at my window now, holding a photo of Emma. The evening light casts gold across my face. I look at her tiny smile, her bright eyes, and I feel something I haven't felt in years. Peace. I fought for my granddaughter, and I'd do it all over again.